One of the things we're working hard to kind of eliminate is the challenges is all that talent leaving, and particularly not only leaving, but commercializing it and, outside of Canada. So our main goal is to build a quantum data center, but if we can achieve that, we've kind of managed to sort of go against the grain in terms of what, has happened to other technologies. AI is the latest example. We started in 2016. Since then, many more incubators, many more venture capitalists, and all the things that you need, talent, have flocked or started in Toronto. So yeah, it's a great place to be, and we're leveraging all these things.
Welcome back to Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen, founder and managing partner of Ripple Ventures. And we've got a special episode today with Christian Weedbrook, the founder and CEO of Xanadu, a Toronto-based powerhouse that's leading the charge in photonic quantum computing. With a physicist's precision and an entrepreneur's vision, Christian has steered Xanadu since 2016, raising over $250 million and forging partnerships that are redefining what's possible in the space. From groundbreaking collaborations like their recent work with Disco on advanced Wayfair processing for lower optical losses, to milestones in ultra-low loss photonic chips with Hyperlight, Xanadu is on track towards their ambitious goal of a fault-tolerant quantum data center by 2029. In this conversation, we'll hear Christian's founder story, unpack Xanadu's latest breakthroughs, discuss Canada's potential to lead in quantum tech without repeating AI's missteps, and explore real-world applications that could revolutionize AI, drug discovery, and beyond. Whether you're a quantum enthusiast or just curious about the tech shaping our future, this episode is packed with insights. So sit back, grab your headphones, and let's jump into the tank with Christian Weedbrook. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's Tank Talk, a quick word from our sponsor, Fasken. If you're an early stage founder navigating the legal side of startups, chances are you'll need someone like Will Shaw in your corner. Will is a partner at Fasken, and he is here to help us break down some of the common startup legal questions we get all the time. Will, thanks for joining us in the tank today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Will, a lot of early stage founders that we deal with at Ripple, and obviously you deal with on a daily basis, are debating so many different things when it comes to working with investors and partners. The first thing we always ask is, should I raise a safe note or go after a priced round? So first off, what's your perspective on this, and what are the key differences a lot of founders should know about the two?
Yeah, safes are definitely faster, but they kick the conversation down the road on a few important things. Like, for example, a safe will defer setting a valuation, which makes things simple up front, but it can lead to unexpected dilution down the road if you're not managing your cap table. A price round is setting the valuation now, so everybody knows what they're going to own in the company, but it's also giving away a little bit more in the sense of rights. So a founder really needs to watch how much their dilution they're taking on, and also think about what rights they're giving away and what the timing is for crystallizing all of those things.
Right. And there's a lot of these in-between things that people also try to jam into safe notes because they are a little bit faster, but they want a little bit more protection,
Yep.
which we call side letters. So we hear about them a lot, Will, especially in more competitive rounds. What are some of the factors that founders should think about and look out for when an investor asks for a side letter?
Side letters can be useful, especially when the safe is a standard form. And exactly to your point, Matt, you're trying to get other rights in there. So they can give specific rights to special investors like pro rata rights or extra information or board observer seats that aren't in the main deal. But founders should make sure they're not creating long-term risks or burden or giving one investor an unfair advantage that might scare off future investors.
Yeah, I know. We definitely obviously like having side letters as well, being an institutional investor where safe notes may be a faster path, but there are certain things that investors need to have in protection when they're not doing a price round. We have worked together on many transactions with you and your team, Will. You guys have been fantastic partners of ours, but a lot of things that happen at the beginning of a company's journey kind of end up biting them in the butt on the other side when they either exit or sell the company. Many think about acqui-hires or M&A transactions, and we all face it. Not every company is going to go public. They often get acquired early and go through these acqui-hire scenarios. What are some of the things that founders should think about from a legal standpoint, if they're going forward with an acqui-hire or some type of M&A transaction?
Just start early. Keep track of your documents as you're going through things. Make sure they're in a data room. Make sure your IP is properly assigned. You make sure your contracts are clean. There are a lot of things that are simple to do at the time, but are really difficult to fix later on. And an acquirer is going to dig into everything, especially IP, the team agreements. If those aren't buttoned up, you're going to lose a lot of leverage and you may end up killing the deal.
Yeah. And also keeping track of all this information is really important, especially for obviously when you want to work with lawyers because they're not always in your business all the time. So you got to catch them up on a lot of things. What other things do you think founders should do to be, prepared for the unexpected?
You know, one of the things they can do, especially in the M&A context, hire some good advisors too. Like bring in an M&A advisor, for example, to help you navigate the negotiating the commercial side of the deal or the financial side of the deal. Make sure you've got a good finance team. And if you don't have a super strong finance team who's helped you through acquisitions, work with an outside advisor who can help you on the finance side with getting your financial statements in order. Again, all of this stuff is easier the earlier you bring the advisors in, and they can really help you avoid some unexpected outcomes down the road.
Well, we always refer to your team as like that outsourced in-house counsel for startups. Can you explain what that looks like in practice for someone who's maybe never worked with the Fasken team before?
We think about when you have in-house counsel, you're not concerned about calling them. You're not concerned about, going to them and talking about your risks. And we want to play that role for early stage companies. So we want founders to call us. And that means we need to generate a special kind of relationship where you feel comfortable calling us and we can have those really candid strategic conversations. And you know that we're going to be there to help assess those risks and to do it in a practical way where we're not worried about boiling the legal ocean. We're worried about how do we make sure the company gets from point A to point B, and what do we really need to do today?
Yeah, Fasken's also super active in the startup scene here in Canada. You're a part of CDL, Techstars, Founder Fuel. Why is that so important to you and the team at Fasken?
It kind of comes back to a core value we have, which is just be helpful. It's been a core value the team's had predating me. It's just something that the firm does too. And I think about if you're part of the technology ecosystem in Canada, you have an obligation to give back. You have an obligation to get involved and support the founders. It's really hard to build a business these days, especially hard to build a business over the last couple of years. We're there because we want to be helpful. We want to educate people. We want to make sure that they're not stepping on legal landmines. I was just doing another presentation this morning. We do lots of presentations, lots of free office hours. We want to be out there and be helpful.
Yeah, you guys have also been a part of so many founder success stories. Before we wrap up, Will, I would love it if you can share maybe one big founder tip for anyone out there who's trying to get their startup to the next level, whether it's the next funding round or the next exit. What are one of the things that you see the best founders do to make those things become a reality?
The best founders that we work with, they just surround themselves with good people. It's good counsel, it's good investors, it's good advisors, it's people who've been there before, they've done it, they have experience, they're practical, and really their interests are aligned and they're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, these are awesome insights, Will. Thank you so much to you and the Fasken team for supporting Tank Talks. All right, now let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Tank, Christian. So excited to have you here.
Great. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You are obviously in one of the most incredibly interesting spaces right now, which is quantum computing. But before we dig into all that exciting stuff, it would be great if you give our listeners a brief background from your transition from academia to building a company in the cutting edge field of quantum computing and, what your journey was like, from being a quantum physicist to basically the founder of one of the leading quantum computing companies in Canada, Xanadu.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. So as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm in and live here, citizen here in Canada, but originally from Australia. And so that's kind of where the story started. So I did undergrad in math and physics at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. And then really just continue to follow, things that I love to do, where I could learn and what I was good at and enjoyed. And so after undergrad, I did a master's in really quantum security, it's known as. And then after I did a PhD in quantum computing, I continued that route. So after I graduated, I was a postdoc at MIT in Cambridge. And then after that, a postdoc at University of Toronto. During that whole time was contributing to the field of photonic quantum computing. And sort of rewind before I even started academia and undergrad, I was always loved reading books, biographies on well-known people and businesses and so forth. I was always looking for a way to bring those two things together, love of kind of quantum computing and also my love of entrepreneurship. And decided to start Xanadu in 2016 here in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, starting Xanadu obviously is something that people dream of, but don't actually take all the way through from academia to commercialization. Starting a company in an emerging field often involves a lot of overcoming of significant hurdles, essentially, particularly when turning theoretical quantum research into a viable product. As you've done with Xanadu's photonic approach, what were some of those big challenges early on into getting this from, the lab and the research into a commercialization state?
Well, if quantum computing is going to reach its full potential, it's all about the hardware and making, advances in the hardware. So whenever I think of those questions, it always comes back to the hardware. We're using light or photons to build our quantum computers. So think lasers, fiber optics, and things of that nature. And part and parcel on sort of continuing to make breakthroughs and so forth is really the funding. So I would say making breakthroughs in the field that we're doing in the research, initially in the early days, it was very key. Now it's more engineering and productization, which is a very different thing to the early days. Hiring wasn't too bad in the early days too, because I came from academia, so I had a lot of colleagues and friends that I could kind of see if they're interested in joining. And I think the first 80 hires were all PhDs in physics, whether it was experimental or theoretical. So the technology is hard, some of the challenges there, but the team has always managed to break through. But fundraising, that's always the most difficult thing. And what's interesting is, so far we've raised $250 million, which is a lot of money, but it never gets easier. There's always some other barrier that's put up. So for instance, in the early days, it was a question of, trying to get the first check was what is quantum computing in 2016. Now it's a question of, we're interested in quantum computing from an investor point of view, but why should we choose your approach and your team? And so what happens is when you've had a certain level of success, you may think it becomes easier. But now that we're valued at $1 billion, you now are no longer valid in a certain section of the VC community because it's too big for them. They prefer to make smaller checks. And then you go to larger rounds where we are, but then you start having challenges where you need product market fit, you need revenue and all that sort of stuff, which completely makes sense, but perhaps not as much for like a moonshot and something that will change the world like quantum computing. So that's always been a challenge, and I suspect always will be.
You've always had to break through that ceiling, it feels like, at every turn when you guys are raising capital. And you've had, as you said, $250 million in funding injected into the company. But when you're trying to be a leader in a space, when there's billions of dollars being funded into companies like PsiQuantum, Orca, obviously the legacy players like IBM and then Google, how do you even frame the conversation for a generalist investor, or a generalist investor is not even really thinking about quantum, per se, and they're just looking at it from like the total market size and trying to make any bets they can in players that may actually gain market share?
Well, yeah, in the first few years, it was really about the generalist investor, and you'd have to go back to the sort of why we're doing this. Why would you want to use quantum computer rather than normal computers? And really talking about the huge benefits, moonshot aspect, and it's going to revolutionize our lives in the future. But now it's more about we just try and find the investors that are interested in quantum. So we're not even having that conversation for the most part. There's always exceptions, but most of the time we're just looking for investors that want to invest in quantum, and it makes it an easier conversation. It's doesn't mean it'll always be a successful conversation, meaning that they'll invest, but I think that's the key thing. And a lot of investors these days are interested in quantum computing and have been educating themselves for the last couple of years. And I think us and a lot of investors and others in the community do believe that quantum will be the next big thing after, the current hype with AI. So that's our approach. Choose people that want you, which I think is probably a good thing in life.
Okay, so you said one word there that I think we got to double click on, which is hype. You say we're in the hype of AI, but quantum also had its hype moment as well. It just feels like it's been a bit usurped by the AI rush. Talk to us about the hype you think there is around AI and, how you think about it being in the field of quantum computing for so long. And where do you think this kind of shows its head next?
I think it will show its head next when there's some version, it's not a perfect analogy, but some version of quantum's ChatGPT moment.
Right.
I've been reading a couple of books on, the founding and sort of story of OpenAI, and it's kind of fascinating. Before they released, I think it was a ChatGPT 2 or 3 maybe, which went mainstream, where everyone knew about it. They were surprised how big it took off because GPT-3 was already around, and someone could have made that product of ChatGPT before them. So they released it with little fanfare and it took off. So I found that very interesting where sometimes you just don't know when something's going to happen like that. And, potentially something like that will happen in quantum. ChatGPT is very much a consumer facing app where we all know about it. Quantum's first breakthrough will probably be something in quantum chemistry, material design. It'll be important, an important stepping stone. That's when you can potentially have billions of dollars in revenue. But it'll be its version in the sense that, the everyday person won't know what it means, but that'll be its takeoff moment that will lead to many, many things. So I think that's the big thing. And really, you need a large scale quantum computer that can do that, what we call a quantum data center.
And that's what you're obviously trying to build. But quantum has been, in the world's nomenclature for 20 years now. It's gone from, these sort of academic kind of lab ideas to, Jeff Bezos and In-Q-Tel and Goldman Sachs putting in big money in the early 2010s, and then you've got firms like Google, obviously, that came out with their AI quantum lab in 2014. IBM began pouring money into this field as well. It feels like we've been pushing the envelope on quantum and getting to that quantum advantage for quite some time. Do you think if AI was not at the hype level it was, or it is at right now, there would still be more attention focused on quantum instead of having taken a bit of a back seat because of all the excitement around AI? Or is it just the natural course of evolution for quantum?
Maybe it's taken a bit of a backseat, but I would argue probably that everything other than AI has taken a backseat. It just seems like that's the only thing we're hearing. Quantum hasn't been around in terms of its technology approach as many decades as AI, so it's still relatively new, particularly when it comes to computing. So we've never had, you often hear quantum is 20 years away. It's always 20 years away. But yeah, but it hasn't been 20 years yet. So we often hear about maybe D-Wave, which was in the early days, but really D-Wave is a, early version of a quantum computer. It can do a small subset of what basically the rest of us can do these days, which is universal photonic quantum computer, which we're all headed towards, which will really change the world. So I think this sort of second version of quantum computing, the revolution, is much different to maybe the hype we heard in the 2000s and 2010s.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have had some pretty big milestones. Xanadu recently achieved a major milestone with photonic error correction, which addresses key limitations in quantum systems and paves the way for practical use cases. So can you tell us a bit about the recent breakthroughs in photonic error correction, why this is a game changer for real world quantum applications?
Yeah, for sure. So in order to actually solve real world applications, you need to be able to get a handle on the errors. So imagine if we logged into into the internet and you type in a URL or go to a website and it never went to the website you thought it should. Basically, it's giving you the wrong answer. And so you want a computer that can do what you're hoping it can do. You want 1 + 1 to add to 2. And so in order to solve big problems, you need a big quantum computer and it needs to be able to tolerate errors, and therefore it needs error correction. So that's kind of the premise. And for us, our big result that the team had that was published in the high-ranking journal Nature 2 months ago, it showed a new type of error tolerable, error resistant qubits, so quantum bits, specifically for our computer. And so it was a very big deal. The team was very proud of it. And as mentioned, you need to have every single tool in your toolbox that can help cope with errors. Error correction is one way through redundancy, but also if you can manufacture these photonic qubits that can kind of be a bit more robust or resistant to errors, then that's better as well. And that's what the team achieved.
And this is the concept of quantum advantage, right? So computers outperform classical ones using useful tasks. I assume that's the holy grail in the field.
Yeah, it is. It's a really tricky phrase. Sometimes people mean quantum advantage as, say, quantum supremacy. Sometimes they say quantum computational advantages, all these terms. We just prefer, maybe quantum commercial advantage, something that customers are going to pay for. We actually demonstrated 3 years ago now quantum supremacy, which some people also call quantum advantage, depends who you talk to, but that was for a very specific math problem, so not a business problem, but it would have taken the world's fastest supercomputer at the time 7 million years to solve. And our computer that we called Borealis solved it in 2 minutes. So that's the kind of craziness from 7 million years down to 2 minutes that a quantum computer can do. And you need a quantum data center, error correction, all the things we've been talking about to really scale up, to see those 7 million years down to 2 minutes sort of breakthroughs, but for things that customers would pay for. And we kind of call that quantum commercial advantage.
Yeah, and talking about commercial, obviously that's the focus right now for the business as it's been, pushing the limits for quite some time, but now it's trying to get the rubber to meet the road in terms of commercialization. And you've set out this vision for a quantum data center in Toronto, potentially on Lake Ontario, obviously trying to tie your journey back to your Canadian roots. What is the plan, and how are you thinking about this, and why do it, in Toronto or near Toronto and Lake Ontario?
Well, we're based in downtown Toronto and, originally from Australia, Canadian citizen now. We really want to do something big in Canada. So it's often easy or sort of necessary sometimes. Sometimes you don't have a choice to kind of leave Canada and go to the US for a few different reasons. We want to stay here as long as possible. And so I think it's, given that, it's great to sort of have the flagship quantum data center here in Toronto. Our goal, though, is to build these, much like Amazon and Azure, to build these all around the world. But we'd love to start one of our first ones here in Toronto.
Give us a sense of size. We see all these data centers being built. Obviously, we've got the ones in, Aberdeen, Texas. You've got the Memphis, super clusters. Like, what are we talking about in terms of sheer size here for these things to be operational?
You can think of it as, say, 1 to 2 acres of land. And for the most part, we'll look from the outside very much like a normal data center. So you're 1 to 2 acres of land. You'll have some sort of nondescript factory-looking warehouse, but inside you'll have hundreds to thousands of server racks that are networked together, all very similar to a normal data center. But in our case, inside the data server racks will be small quantum computers, and you network them together to give you greater than the sum of the parts sort of thing, where customers can log in and use it to solve very big problems. And we aim to build that in 2029 here in Toronto. We were talking about our Nature paper a couple of months ago. We also had another Nature paper in January that showed how to network quantum computers together in a modular and scalable way. And no one's done that before or since. That's one of the kind of bottlenecks, other approaches to ours, where it's difficult to network together quantum computers. Just, quantum mechanics makes it very hard, basically, if you're not a photonic-based approach. So we're in good stead. We've solved that problem, basically. Now we need to continue working on error correction. But once those two things are put in place, they go basically helps lay the foundation for a quantum data center.
And the big thing with, obviously, Xanadu at the early days, I've always heard from, your investor, John Ruffalo, is that the room temperature was a big factor in terms of what you guys can operate as. Huge cooling systems were required, obviously, for this high-powered data center. But is there anyone else that offers this, data center for customers and commercialization right now? Because I don't even think D-Wave has that. They're thinking about it, trying to offer on-premises quantum computing systems, I believe.
Yeah, we're not looking to really set up an on-premise. We want to build our own premise.
Right.
We want to build our own data center. So no one has that yet. You would only have that once you've solved all that, completely de-risk the technology, because you don't want to waste money building up something that you haven't completely de-risked. So we're on track to build that in 2029. But the room temperature side of things is very important. The overall thing, though, us and everyone in the industry needs some form of cooling. So it's not a matter of having it or not. You do need it, whether it's cryogenics, whether it's laser cooling or whatever, you need something. It's really, the question is, how much does an approach need it? In our data center, we estimate around 10% of the footprint is cooling. So only 10%. Most others go up to 90, 95, near 100% cryogenics are required. So we still need some, but nothing for the operation of the system. It's more for the initialization side of things at the very beginning. And that's a huge benefit in terms of cost. Iteration, it takes, for most cryogenics, it takes a day or two to cool it up, heat it back up to take the chip out and put a new one in, cool it down and so forth. So there's a lot of time it takes to sort of just iterate here. And also, the cooling side of things just makes it more expensive as well, and the cooling itself. So it's the best approach. No other approach comes close in terms of that aspect.
Yeah, I remember seeing videos and pictures of like the Google data centers that they had like in the very northern parts of like, I don't know, Iceland or something. They've got all the different colored pipes running through, but that's all just for cooling. They have the climate there, but they also are running a ton of cooling gauges through there, besides what they obviously have to put in terms of electrical and then obviously the server racks and things like that. Now, in terms of the capital required for something like this, the projects that you need to kind of raise capital for, what are we talking about here?
As we talked about, we have around 250 we've raised so far. That doesn't include, say, if we include government grants and so forth, US and Canadian gets up to 300 million. We probably need around another billion or so to build the final data center. That, if you look at the latest data centers that you mentioned, so exascale data centers, they're like $2, $3, $4 billion. So the idea of ours is it's same order of magnitude, a little bit cheaper, but one of our data centers for some very big problems would be equivalent to hundreds of the normal big data centers. So you can think of the energy savings now as tremendous. So yeah, that's the rough estimate of where we are at the moment.
And why do you think Canada has an advantage in this realm? Obviously, you've gotten great support from the Canadian government. You've got Canadian investors. Your team is obviously Canadian. Where does Canada kind of have the advantage here?
Well, I think it goes back to many things it's has the advantage of, and that's historically the trainee, sort of the foundation of where the talent comes from. As mentioned, I was a U of T postdoc, and before that, and to this day, we have great institutions like Perimeter Institute, we have IQC, also in Waterloo, great universities throughout Canada that have been a breeding ground of really top performers, some very well-known people. So that's been happening for the last couple of decades. So really it's kind of ground zero for the talent. Now the challenge is, and that's one of the things we're working hard to kind of eliminate, is the challenge is all that talent leaving. And particularly not only leaving, but commercializing it and, outside of Canada. So our main goal is to build a quantum data center, but if we can achieve that, we've kind of managed to sort of go against the grain in terms of what, has happened to other technologies. AI is the latest example. So great talent, great funding. We started in 2016. Since then, many more incubators, many more venture capitalists, and all the things that you need, talent, have flocked or started in Toronto. So yeah, it's a great place to be, and we're leveraging all these things.
Obviously, brain drain affects everyone, but at the high level of technical expertise that you require, I can only imagine how competitive it is with Meta gobbling up all the AI research talent out of OpenAI or Google or Apple, whatever it may be. Like, is the competition for talent been the hardest it's ever been in your career since building Xanadu?
It hasn't been a huge challenge for us because we're using photonics. So the first 80 to 100 hires, as I mentioned, they had advanced degrees. Because it's not the same approach as IBM, Google, and others, we weren't competing for the same talent. There is competition on things like we're building our own cloud platform. So that's just the usual tools for that. It's just you can work at any other company, software engineers. So we compete in that area. That's been a challenge. The software side of things, we've had to, we have our Penny Lane software, which is one of the leading, if not the leading software stacks in the world, in the industry. And so that's always a challenge. But for the most part, it hasn't been too bad for us. And we've always been very, we paid good salaries, but our approach allows us to sort of get a very low cost per qubit than pretty much every other approach.
It must be a part of your mission too, that people have to believe in for what you're building and obviously align with that. So it's not just anybody who wants to work in technology or startups that you're trying to attract. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But you've also made some pretty big strides in partnering with companies like Corning and Applied Materials. Your participation in DARPA's quantum benchmarking initiative obviously provides some great validation. Talk to us about how these collaborations have accelerated Xanadu's path to being a quantum data center.
The few of the ones you mentioned gives us funding. So anything from DARPA or the Canadian government, any funding is welcome for something that's going to take a bit of capital. So that's an obvious aspect that we love. The Corning one, for instance, it indicates we're now, it's been many years since anyone referred to us as a science experiment, but these sort of partnerships in the last year or so really cement our place in. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond engineering. It goes to mass manufacturing and so forth. So we work with a number of foundries around the world as well. So I think all those things, it helps us draw talent. It helps us get prepared for this data center, because the data center will have many chips, tens of thousands of chips in this data center. So we need to be able to prepare to not only do a couple of chips, but, on the higher scale of things as well. So all these partnerships allows us we have partnerships with Volkswagen as well. That's the aspect of use cases. So once we have this quantum data center, what do we use it for? And we work with customers like Volkswagen to, hopefully solve their biggest problems once the quantum data center comes alive.
Speaking of use cases, obviously we live in a pretty volatile world these days. Everything is so interconnected, and governments are getting more and more advanced in the technologies they're thinking about adopting and implementing. What are some, without getting into specifics, some of the military government interests in quantum computing, particularly around cryptography and breaking security protocols, things like that?
Quantum computing was really put on the map in 1994 when Peter Shor showed theoretically that if you had a big enough quantum computer, you could hack RSA and elliptic curve, which are codes that form the bedrock of our security of the internet. So if a large enough quantum computer existed today, our internet security would be significantly at risk. And in fact, what governments all around the world are doing is really downloading information now to decrypt later on. So, this conversation that we have now, it's not really it's not really time sensitive. It's not really need to be secure, but there's certain things that people are downloading and not being able to decrypt now that will be valuable in 1 or 2 decades once a large scale quantum computer arrives. So medical records, they need to be secure in principle for say 80 years. Government secrets, trade secrets, there's many, many different things that need to be secure. So even though governments can download stuff now and not decrypt them, in the future, they're still going to be relevant. So I think cryptography and the ability to sort of crack RSA elliptic curve is very key. And that's why governments around the world have been interested to varying degrees for a couple of decades now. The good thing, that sounds quite scary, but the good thing is that people are working on what's known as post-quantum cryptography codes, and these codes will replace RSA and elliptic curve. And in fact, that already exist and in production, not widely adopted yet. No, they still need to be certified and so forth. But a quantum computer, when it tries to hack it, it's just kind of, it can't do it. It's not vulnerable to quantum computing attacks. So the good news is on the horizon, but it still needs to act much faster because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of information that you can download but not decrypt. That's, we need these codes as soon as possible.
Who's working on post-quantum cryptography initiatives like this? Like
Most
PCA Shields I've seen as one.
Yeah, most governments are, and Google and others have a few years ago had browsers that are post-quantum secure. I mean, I think the app Signal may have some post-quantum. WhatsApp maybe as well.
Palo Alto Networks maybe, like those
Maybe.
players.
Maybe
IBM?
IBM has a team working on post-quantum as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I asked you this because there's obviously a huge emphasis around like retaining IP and things like that, because that's some of the things we hear about, all the hacking around IP, whether it's from overseas, adversaries or just spies that are working in some of the largest tech companies right now. It's got to be one of the biggest things governments are talking about. And retaining IP is a huge problem here in Canada, and also fostering domestic innovation is a one. How do you think about Xanadu maintaining a role in sort of helping Canada maintain our own quantum sovereignty, or how the government can help focus on IP ownership and the rights towards certain IP, with Xanadu being the backbone to secure that?
Well, it all comes back to how the government can help us and other quantum companies with funding. Capital is the big thing. It costs time and money to patent things. We do as much as we can, but it's always a trade-off because you just can't have anyone writing these patents or even sketching out the idea for a patent. You need the technical people to do it, but they should be building this quantum computer, this quantum data center. So I think patenting as many things as we can, given the trade-off between time and money. But in general, I think, one of the good things, it's challenging times. One of the good things about the tariff situation at the moment is it is forcing us Canadians and also the Canadian government to, realize we can't rely on everyone, at least currently, having more sovereign technology, having more sovereign ownership. And so I think it is a great opportunity here for the government to play a role in advanced technologies like quantum computing that can have significant ramifications through productivity and the workforce and just changing society over the next couple of years.
I believe Minister Evan Solomon, attending your packaging plant launch in Toronto during the Tech Week. You've received funding from the Strategic Innovation Fund. But do you think we need a Canadian DARPA to provide more targeted risk-embracing mechanisms for quantum advancement?
1,000%, yeah.
Why don't we have one?
That's a good question. You have to ask whoever's in charge of that. The first thing that would be good in terms of funding, and it doesn't have to be quantum would be great, but just deep tech. If someone gets a DARPA award, the Canadian government immediately matches it, because you'd have to do the due diligence there. It's a very quick and easy thing. I think what would be great is a technology sovereign wealth fund. I think that will be amazing. Say the government or whoever, pension funds, whoever it is, puts in $1 billion US into this deep tech fund, and then you run it to invest in the next big moonshots, because it's quite easy and understandable just to invest in those things that have product market fit, that tick all the boxes of like just a sheet that you have and you go through tick, tick, tick. It means you've seen it before. It means you have categories. You know how to grade something. But the big things that can change the world. You don't know what it looks like. You don't know how to grade it. And that's by definition, because it's just so new. So having something like that, I think will be great. I mean, we've spent a lot of time in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Australia, all the big pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. They have a different approach to the pension funds here. And they have, riskier capital, I would say. So I think that's something that's lacking in Canada. I see risky patient capital, and having a fund for that would be fantastic for deep tech in general.
Yeah, from your lips to Carney's ears into the Maple 8's ears, maybe don't invest in highways and bridges anymore as much as we need the deep tech as well to take center stage. But you've obviously raised, as you said, 250 million, 300 million with grants. You're raising money now, I'm sure, continuing to build out the future of quantum and Xanadu's future. Talk to us about what the landscape's like out there for venture capital dollars in this. You said you've been traveling around the world, meeting with some global investors to bring capital into Xanadu. And how have you handled the pressure to maybe relocate to better funding ecosystems and continue to build this company here in Canada?
Yeah, the pressure is always there, because when things get hard, you often think about, well, where else can I go? But, we want to stay here. It's a great country. We want to show that you can stay and build something here. So in terms of fundraising, as a founder, particularly in a quantum space, you're always fundraising, whether you're doing it explicitly or not. You're always forming these connections, taking these meetings. So, but it's tough. As I mentioned, you sort of make it through, as you know, the seed, Series A, Series B. Each one has its own challenges, but when you kind of graduate to like where we are now, D, you get different sorts of challenges, because in some aspects we're like a Series A company, but we're valued at a Series D company. And so I found that, again, it's a function of being a moonshot company, which is a great thing. We're always in the cracks each of the round. We look like something else. We look like something familiar, but not quite there. And it's always a challenge. But, there's a lot of money out in the world. Doesn't mean it's available, but it means you just got to keep hustling, working very hard every day, and you can't fail if you don't give up. And so far we've had great success fundraising, and I'm sure through the work of the team and its achievements, we'll be able to do something special again and the one time after, and keep going.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know if you saw the Build Canada memo that we dropped on rewarding the risk takers, but it's really hard for people like you to continue to kind of pound pavement, try to raise capital with the structure that we have here in terms of like funding infrastructure, capital gains structure, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking with a lot of these investors, do they even know that you're Canadian to begin with, or does it come out later in conversations?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, because
But you may be recognized as like a US or a global company before they even know that you're Canadian.
yeah, maybe if we haven't talked, usually when I reach out, I'll say the first thing I'll say, founder and CEO at a Canadian company. Blah, blah, blah.
Get it out of the way so the accent doesn't throw them off.
Yeah. And, I don't think they care. Honestly, the biggest thing is that they find the best deal. So we're so close to the US when we speak to the US investors. I don't think it matters too much. So I still think sometimes if we were a US company, we'd be looked at differently. And even by our own investors, I think we'd looked at differently, unfortunately. So,
How so? Give us an example of how you would be looked at differently.
oh, well, maybe that's sort of, you're better by being in the US, even if we just copy it and paste it ourselves and put ourselves in the US, because we're US, maybe there's just something different. And there's sometimes a lack of confidence with being Canadian. Honestly, I don't think too much about this. I think whatever it is, wherever we're based, we've just got to keep working very hard, hire the best people. We've got a fantastic approach where we think could be one of the winners, if not the winner. And our software stack is tremendous and one of the winners as well. And so I think, the US is great because of the funding, but ultimately it's about talent. And so if you have the best company, if OpenAI was based here in Canada, then the investors will come here. They just go wherever the best deals are. So if we can keep doing what we're doing, I don't think it's too much of a problem, but we'll see. We also have an office in the US as well. And we have about 25 to 30 folks based throughout the US. So we'll continue to add to that. So I don't see it as a big challenge, at least not at the moment.
Yeah, because if you look at the Cohere model, right, like they kind of have their Canadian presence, they've got their Bay Area presence, now they've got their UK and maybe Korean presence, because they are kind of lining up with like where the government chips are falling. And,
Yes.
and maybe that's an approach that you can take as well while still having HQ back in Canada. There's obviously a lot of hype, in the quantum space. As you mentioned, the field is rife with announcements. basically making it hard to discern what's real and what's not. How do you separate a lot of the noise that's happening? How do you stay focused? And what are the most exciting use cases that you're really excited to deliver on for customers in the future?
In terms of the hype, it's a funny one. The investors have a lot of trouble, completely understandable, and sort of understanding, when they very much want to invest in quantum, but how do I decide between the various different modalities? It's very hard to do. Even for us who are in the field, we're experts in photonic quantum computing and quantum computing in general, but the real experts at other approaches are at those companies. And so it takes us time to really understand what they're saying in the press release or what they're not saying. So it's hard for everyone, even if you're in the field. In terms of the use cases, we're really excited about anything related to quantum chemistry. I think us and others in the industry are really excited in that because it's probably the lowest hanging fruit in terms of the size of the quantum computer that can see true customer traction and revenue. So, we often talk about a quantum data center. Think of that being interchangeable with phrases like fault tolerant, error corrected, a million physical qubits. All of those things kind of tell the same story. And based on that, quantum chemistry seems to be the leading candidate. So for us, we're focused on that, but it's a big field. So we're focused more specifically in the subfield of next generation battery development. Solar cells is another one we're focused on as well. And all these things are governed by physical properties, which are governed by quantum physics. And to truly make the best products, you can't use traditional computers to simulate something, to create a new battery, to create new solar cells. The starting point has to be simulations, but using a quantum computer to give you the most accurate and fastest results. So then you can go out and build the best battery. You can go out and build the best solar cell. And so they're the things that we're working on and the most and that we're most excited about.
And you don't think we can get there with AI? Like right now, like the material sciences space is only going to be created with new materials being created with quantum.
My official answer is I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say no, I don't think traditional AI will get there. I think that part of it is hype. At the very least, again, I could be wrong, is that you'll need quantum maybe augmented with AI in some way. But who knows? And my official answer is I don't know.
What about in like the biotech space, drug discovery?
Same thing, yeah. I don't know if anyone's seen any breakthroughs. I really don't know what the use cases are for AI. Apart from ChatGPT and things of that sort of, close cousins of those sort of applications, I don't see anything that far resembles the money and hype that's got into it. I do think it'll be a game changer, but I can't see it this decade.
Do you use AI personally?
No. The only time I use it is just, if I search for something on Google, it's already forced me to look at the Gemini response at the top. I'll do that, but no, I don't use it.
You don't play around with OpenAI, ChatGPT, Grok, anything like that, really, for personal preference?
Kind of boring. But, I use Grok for pictures and animating, but how many times can I do it? It's like a 5-year-old, a kid doing stuff like that.
So interesting. It's like a toy for you.
It's a toy, but we do use it significantly a lot in the building.
Operationally, internally, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it, mostly in terms of AI for optimization side of things, so chip layouts and so forth as well. But personally, I don't really use it.
It's so interesting because you're on the bleeding edge of the next wave of technology with quantum. AI essentially is like this thing you kind of know about, but don't really get too excited about because you're so excited about the future of what quantum and the software that you're building is doing. It's like a toy, literally. It's like, could you play with like a set of like real golf clubs and play golf, or do you want to play with like Fisher Price toys and have like a little bit of fun, but not as much fun?
Yeah, I just find the current AI applications just distracting, like social media. I should stay off it, but I just can't. So
I appreciate the honesty. As a deep tech founder working in a really hard space, what are your biggest strengths and your biggest weaknesses that you've uncovered over the last almost decade of building Xanadu?
The biggest strengths is probably just the ability to work hard. I think it's easy to say, but so many of us at Xanadu work very hard. And it's a funny thing too. I just recently read this quote by Steve Jobs, is that you can't tell, it's hard to sort of educate someone on what it means to work hard. There's so many times I've just noticed where folks, I work 7 days a week. And there's a lot of sometimes when you read in other companies where it's like, well, what happens if I work harder 9 to 5? What happens if I optimize that time? Some people just don't get it. And so for me, it's like, well, optimize the weekend as well. You know, like if you're going to change the world, you cannot work 9 to 5. Like that's just a fact.
So
And
you're a believer in 996 culture?
well, I do work. It seems like that way.
I'm a believer in it too. I'll
Yeah.
take the punches in the face for that, but I believe in it too.
Well, I don't know why there has to be punches in the face. It's very interesting because I've never been told other people they have to explicitly work that. We just try to, encourage people or at least hire people that automatically think that way. But I don't understand why it's a negative, particularly if you're not telling others to do that. It's just like, hey, if you like that, come join us because we're also like that as well. And, we're not just trying to create a new app, which is fine. You're trying to revolutionize how information is processed. And so you can't just do that 9 to 5. But it's more basic for me. It's just a case of we've got so many hours in the day and the week, and I just want to do what I love. So why wouldn't I want to keep working on things I love every day and every hour? So I just look at it more like that.
No, I love it. I appreciate the honesty. Last thing before I jump at our fast favorites, you obviously have probably a lot of experience that a lot of younger founders who are working in the deep tech space would learn from. What is your best advice for founders working in some pretty difficult and technical problems that you would share with them after 10 years of building Xanadu that they should know about heading into their journey, kind of building the next Xanadu in their own fields?
I would say trust your gut. Listen to people, but ultimately you make the decisions and you gotta be headstrong, and you would much rather fail based on your decisions than failing on what other people have told you to do. I think that's really key, but still listen to others and have people that you can confide in. The other one is, just work hard. They're all like, these things are like probably thousands of years old. All of these things, like work hard, they're just very obvious stuff, but you have to work as a founder. Like there is no exception. You're going to have to work 7 days a week. If you're making excuses as a founder, you can't do it. I'm sorry. Like, has there ever been an example of a founder that works 9 to 5? Maybe, but I doubt the company has succeeded. So it's non-negotiable as a founder for sure.
No, I appreciate that. Well, this has been awesome. Let's jump into our fast favorites. So first off, your favorite podcast.
I don't listen to podcasts. Yeah.
Do you listen to anything?
The Beatles?
All right. Next is your favorite newsletter or blog.
Oh, I don't read blogs.
Do you have nothing in the quantum space even that you subscribe to?
No, I may read them because it's been promoted on X, like someone else has shared it, but I don't regularly read these.
Okay, fine. How about Nature Magazine?
No, I don't read.
Okay, fine. Favorite tech gadget? You must have something.
Oh, it's simple. It's probably my my record player, my LP.
What do you play on it? The
Beatles.
All the time?
No, I play the Beatles, Fleetwood Mac, Billy Joel, and Paul McCartney's solo career. They're the kind of go-to for.
Do you play any instruments?
Piano and guitar, but not very well.
Well, I mean, you gotta be pretty good if you gotta listen to those artists.
Exactly.
Can you play those artists?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Next is your favorite new trend. It's gotta be quantum.
It can't be anything other than quantum for sure.
How about your favorite book?
Snowball, about Warren Buffett.
Why do you like that one so much?
Oh, because it's well written, so it sort of speaks to me as I read it. So just fundamentally well written. But I love reading about how his mind is and a lot of philosophy and sort of how he sees his life. It just naturally kind of resonated with me. And then sort of like when I read about in the early days, like he would just go up into his attic or, top floor and just read and think all day long. And a lot of this stuff is very academic. He seems like an academic or professor, but he's able to commercialize it in the sense of like the knowledge gets put to use. So yeah, I love just the principles, I guess.
I watched a documentary on Bill Gates once where I think in the summertime, he goes up to this very small cabin he has in
There's Diet Coke, frigid Diet Coke too.
Yeah, in Maine, and he locks himself in this cabin for a week, and he's got about a dozen books, and he just reads all of them by himself in this cabin for a week every year, and it's just his way to kind of purge through everything and get it all out of his system. And it says it's his only time to be able to really focus and absorb. Like obviously, he reads things like you would probably read, it's like polio, or things like that. Yeah. But it's pretty intense. Have you read all the books behind you? I hope so.
No, not all of them. I would say it just keeps going. There's like 4 shelves of them. I've read most of them, and others I'd buy, and like I'm going to get to that. Like there's a one up the very top, Mark Twain. I can't wait to get to that, but I haven't read that for instance.
There's probably about, I don't know, 250, 300 books behind you, I'd say.
Yeah, something like that probably.
Okay. So you got pretty good halfway through at least. And last but not least, your favorite life lesson.
I think if you don't give up it's very hard to fail. I love persistence. I love that because I don't think I'm very good at anything really, except maybe not giving up and believing I can achieve something, whether that's true or not. And so I like those ones because I think I'm just an average dude. It can apply to any average person. And so I like stuff like that where it's like, hey, well, I can't do what all those people do, but hey, if I work hard, maybe I can kind of get somewhere and not give up. So that's always resonated with me. I wasn't very good at school and stuff like that. So it's like, you think everyone's better than you, which probably true in a lot of situations, but you don't have to be good at everything, just one or two things.
Yeah, you're just a humble Australian dude, not good at school, building one of the biggest deep tech quantum computing companies in the world. Well, thanks so much for joining us in the tank today with Christian Weedbrook, founder and CEO of Xanadu.
Thank you.